I'm Frank Allman. I'm the mayor of Tucker. I want to welcome you to the newest 125-year-old city in the state. We trace our roots officially, I suppose, back to 1892, when we got a post office and a railroad depot, and that was sort of what put you on the map in those days. And so we just celebrated our 125th anniversary of that, and are completing our first year as an incorporated city. So welcome. We hope that you'll consider Tucker a place for your home and your business, where you can live the entire length of your life and all its phases, as well as the breadth of your life we call live, work, play, and pray. I actually volunteered, asked the CEO if I could introduce him tonight, because a couple of things I'd like to say about him for public consumption, if you will. You know, we live in a time when it's hard, even as just a regular citizen, to put your support behind someone, to sort of publicly say that you are willing to follow a particular leader, because we've been let down a lot on all levels of government. As an elected official myself, the cynical world of electedom, there's not a lot to be gained by speaking well and talking about the qualities of another elected official, because if he goes bad, you go bad, and it's not always wise to hitch your wagon to someone else. But I want to tell you tonight, I can unreservedly say that Michael Thurmond has proven already throughout a long career, but in his time as CEO, that he's the kind of leader we can be confident in. He will tell you that he doesn't always get it right every time, all the time, or that he gets it right in the time that he'd like to get it right, but I can tell you he's got the kind of tenacity and the kind of courage and the kind of leadership that our county has sorely needed. He has served, as some of you know, he came in and helped DFACS a very long time ago now, in a difficult time, at a time of substantial change. Didn't just hold the office, hold the job, but did a great job, received a lot of honors, a lot of accolades for that. Maybe you don't know, he grew up as a son of a sharecropper outside Athens. Likes to joke with the mayor of Dunwoody that he was a pig farmer once upon a time, and there aren't many of those in elected office. He led the Department of Labor. He led our DeKalb school system through a very difficult time with much success, and was appointed by governors to those positions. The mystery is that now a guy with a sound mind and otherwise good sense would look across the landscape and seen this job and said, that's the job that I want to take on. But he's the right guy for the job. He's done a great job. Tonight he's here to talk to us about a very specific but very high priority part of that job, which is our sewer system and our consent decree. There's been a lot of progress made. There's a lot more progress to come. That's what we're going to hear about. But I thank you for letting me take just a minute or two to introduce DeKalb County's Chief Executive Officer, my CEO, Michael Thurmond.
Good evening. First, I want to thank Mayor Allman, Frank Allman, for the kind words of introduction, for his leadership, and for being my mayor. As a proud resident of the great city of Tucker, we are honored and privileged to have him as our Chief Executive Officer. He's done an outstanding job leading the birth, the creation, and the progress of our city. I'm honored that he's my leader, but he's also a friend and a confidant, and someone I have and maintain in great esteem. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for hosting us here tonight in Tucker, and thank you for your leadership. I want to thank all of you all who come out tonight at this first public update on consent decree progress here in DeKalb County. This is an initiative that originated within DeKalb County government, is not required by any federal, state, or local agency. But we felt that in order to increase transparency and open up the lines of communication, that it's critical that we continue on an ongoing basis to reach out, to share information, to receive questions, and to help you better understand where we are, and to help us better understand where you would like us to be, your expectations, your concerns. I want to say up front, as the mayor mentioned, I've been in public office or roundabout public affairs for almost 35 years now. I'm not sensitive. Anything that can be said about me has already been said at least twice. But we are here to learn and to share information. I want to thank some important people. First of all, I want to thank EPA and EPD, who have been partners with DeKalb County since 2011 and even before then. Just 2 weeks ago, we had, I think, an outstanding 4.5-hour meeting with the leadership at the regional office. We have an outstanding newly appointed regional administrator, Mr. Trey Glenn. At my request, he met with us. We spoke very frankly and candidly about where we know, first of all, how do we get to where we are, but more importantly, how we move forward. So I want to thank them. I want to thank you in this room, those who have fought for years and decades to protect the environment, the land, the water, and to ensure that we maintain a quality of life. I see Ms. Eccles and others who I've read about, I've known through media, and not necessarily through a personal relationship, but I thank you. I thank the developers and investors in this community who have continued to believe in DeKalb County and who are demonstrating by your continued investment that you believe, as I believe, that DeKalb County is a sleeping economic giant that is beginning to stir again. I want to thank Mr. John Miller and the members of the Water CIP Advisory Group. I met with them, and they have been and continue to provide outstanding leadership, counsel, and direction for myself and for this government. I want to thank the men and women who I work with every day, who long before I came to DeKalb have invested themselves in public service. Now, and I'll go to the slides. Number one, our goal as it relates to the 2011 consent decree is to protect public health and safety. Number two, our goal is to protect and preserve our environmental resources and to recognize that we are a county that needs to continue to grow and to prosper if we're going to be competitive in the 21st century. Those are our primary goals and objectives. That is my mission, and that is why I'm here today. Why is this important? And you can see, but how did we arrive at this point? As the mayor pointed out, the issues that we face today, and I say this, and I say it in some jest, but all sincerity. Everything that happened before January 17, 2017 is not my fault. Can't really blame it on me. But everything that happened before January 1st, 2017, I didn't create it, but I am ultimately responsible for correcting. There is no one other than me under the DeKalb County Charter who has the ultimate responsibility for correcting any and all issues that we face in this county. I accept it, I volunteered for it, and I'm honored that the voters hired me to do this job. One of the things we did at EPA 2 weeks ago, and you have access to it, more or less the PowerPoint we provided the EPA and to the regional administrator. And in meeting with my staff, beginning literally in January and up until now, one of the things I've come to understand that in the world of politics, on rare occasions, the truth is all you need. Just speak the truth and nothing else. So we went to EPA with facts, some embarrassing, some excruciatingly embarrassing, as to what occurred in DeKalb between December 2011 and today. What we shared with them is that DeKalb, over that time period, suffered from dysfunction at the highest levels of management, not just in watershed, but throughout the government. Ultimately, the CEO is responsible. We had lack of oversight and lack of internal and external communication. That's just a fact. It took us 2 years to hire a project manager to oversee these projects. That's 2 years lost. One of the things we share with EPA is that in this administration, we are committed to making up time, but believe me, friends, I cannot recreate time. Once it's lost, it's lost. But I can tell you without any doubt whatsoever, and some of you can attest to that, is that I'm convinced after you hear from my colleagues that you will see that we've gotten things back on track and we're moving in the right direction. You know, you learn from your mistakes, but you don't dwell on them. That's been the essence and the story of my life. On March 31st, 2017, at the state of the county address, and I wanted, because you know, sometimes politicians talk a lot, but the first paragraph was a major part of my speech delivered to the citizens of DeKalb County, specifically as it related to the consent decree and our water and sewer system. This is what I said. In order to comply with the letter and spirit of the consent decree and support economic development, I've initiated full-scale review of all watershed department policies, assumptions, maintenance programs, construction schedules, so forth and so on. And I said it, and I'm not sure it was, I don't think it was really reported in any of the media whatsoever. But I said it because, you know, and I'm sure those who cover DeKalb and to cover politicians, it was just another speech. But it wasn't. You will hear what occurred after the result of that. I said it and we meant it. And we went about the task, number one, of detailing how we got into the situation we're in, why we got into it, and more importantly, how we're going to move forward. That was on the 31st. Thank you. This is important, as I said, for these three reasons. I want to go back one. I want you to see this tree. That's what's key to me. We had a major spill, 6.4 million gallon sewage spill at Snapfinger Creek on August 23rd, 2017. The cause of that was a tree, 18, 20 inch in diameter tree, growing out of a sewer junction box. And I was told by Darren and some of the others that it's estimated that it took about 18, 20 years for that tree to grow to that size. Devastating. That meant all those years it was growing, no one noticed. So I've said publicly, and I've said to you all, that that tree symbolizes almost everything and all the challenges that we face. And that was a critical moment for me. Last slide. I want you to now listen to my colleagues as they begin to speak about the overview, about where we are and where we're going. I'm going to call on Ted Reinhardt. I brought Ted back to DeKalb County because I was convinced that we needed someone who was experienced, someone who had knowledge, expertise, who understood DeKalb County and had high leadership abilities. I brought him back, and he has provided that leadership, and I'll allow him to speak, and I'll come back and talk a little bit.
As the CEO started to talk about some of the problems of the past that he inherited coming in here, and the lack of maintenance, the lack of adequate inspections, not keeping up with all the things you have to do to protect the system, what we of course faced was increased interest from the US EPA and the Georgia EPD in why we were having so many sewer overflows and whether they needed to get directly involved in determining what it was going to take to correct that, because obviously it's not acceptable for the owners and operators of a large system like DeKalb's to have repetitive, regular sewer escaping the system. And so what they did, of course, was their due diligence, did very thorough investigation, 2008, 9, 10, gathered a lot of documentation, went over all the county's reports of maintenance and repair and other things, and of course came to the conclusion that they felt there needed to be a more rigorous program to improve the system. And so what they did was negotiated with us, mostly in 2010, a consent decree that called for an intense effort to show that the county would give its absolute best effort to eliminate sewer overflows from occurring. Now, what we were able to show them, of course, is the majority of our overflows were a maintenance issue. Fats, oils, grease, roots, debris, all these things that as they build up in the pipe over time, of course, are going to start to cause spills to occur. And so what the federal court finally approved in December of 2011, after a rather lengthy process of negotiation, was a very intense program over an 8.5-year period for the county to invest millions of dollars in inspecting, assessing, repairing, rehabilitating, and evaluating the system thoroughly to document for them by June of 2020 that we were getting the level of maintenance and the level of improvement that they would expect from a system of this size. At this point, of course, there's still a lot of work left to do. And as we continue that work, which you'll hear Darren describe in great detail later, there's a part of this that's probably less well understood than the tangible things that you can see out on the street every day. You can see the Vector trucks cleaning the sewers. You can see construction equipment repairing the sewers. But one of the components of this program is that we have a hydraulic model of the system for two primary purposes. One, to ensure that the capital planning in the system anticipates both future needs, future growth, development, and the sizing of the system while you're repairing it and rehabilitating it. And also that we have a tool by which we can evaluate new connections to the system to ensure that as you're making the investment for the future, you're also able to continue to accommodate economic development and then balance what the CEO pointed to in terms of good environmental quality along with economic opportunities. And so the model is meant to be a way to measure both of those efforts over time. And so what you're also going to hear next from one of our county attorneys, Matt Welch, is back to kind of the CEO's point, some efforts at modeling that weren't completely on track, and now the efforts that are undertaken to get it back on track, so that the end goal, as the CEO spoke up front, is that whether it was drama or lack of oversight or whatever caused us to be off track from what otherwise was a good sound plan that EPA and EPD had approved, can now get back on track, both in terms of the level of effort as well as the more inside baseball such as modeling. And with that, I'll turn it over to Matt, who will describe the modeling system.
Good evening, everybody. As Ted said, my name is Matthew Welch. I'm a supervising county attorney in the county attorney's office in DeKalb County. I am Watershed's chief counsel and kind of live and breathe consent decree. I came on board about the same time as the program manager, so I've been at this for about 4 years now. I want to talk to you a little bit about the hydraulic model, as Ted indicated earlier. It is the consent decree requires us to develop a hydraulic model that can be used for two distinct purposes: capital planning and site-specific capacity assessment. The county had received a preliminary model in June of 2016, but our consultants will tell you that model was primarily designed with a goal towards meeting the first prong, the capital improvement prong. That's a little bit rougher of a tool. Your goal there is to identify pipes that are nearing capacity for upsizing purposes or places to put relief sewers, things of that nature. With site-specific capacity assurance, you're looking at the flow contributed to our system by one particular home or one particular development. So it's a much more sensitive analysis. So what happened in June of 2016, the capital planning model was delivered to Watershed, but it began to be used due to a disconnect between our consultants and the folks in Watershed at the time. It began to be used for both purposes. So for a period of about a year, it was being used for both purposes, again, while being primarily designed for only one. When the CEO became aware of that, we get to what is labeled here as the present. Interim procedures were put in place in August of 2017 to control the use of the model for the more sensitive purpose. Those interim procedures were approved for use until the fully developed model was available. That model is now available and will go into use beginning tomorrow. Interim procedures utilize the dynamic dry weather model we were not utilizing the wet weather model in the present protocol. Instead, we look at real world conditions, actual spills, actual events that have taken place, rather than relying on a model that we didn't feel was accurately reflecting the real world conditions. The implementation of these interim procedures by the CEO did result in the reduction of the backlog in capacity requests. Because of the confusion in the use of the planning model for these capacity purposes, there were a large number of pending requests when these protocols were put in place on August 15th. And the majority of those have now been cleared. During the period that we were operating under the present scenario, the interim protocols, work continued to bring the model to full development and to develop protocols for use once that fully developed model was available. Indeed, work has continued up until today. We received the model from the last sewer shed to be modeled by the consultants just last Thursday. So work has been continuing to meet the December 20th deadline. And so today I can say affirmatively, DeKalb County will meet the December 20th, 2017 deadline. Tomorrow we will begin use of the model in capacity assurance, both dry weather and wet weather. We have deemed the model to be fully developed, and beginning tomorrow, there will be no connections of new or increased capacity in DeKalb County unless they have been certified by a Georgia registered professional engineer. Those are the two prongs of the deadline in the consent decree that we have been working to meet by tomorrow. And again, I can indeed say that we will meet those deadlines of having those implemented by tomorrow. So, unfortunately, even though the model is fully developed, there's still a few things we would like to do to get where we'd like to be. So, again, we have a short-term solution and a long-term solution. The short-term solution to be implemented beginning tomorrow. Again, it involves revised interim procedures and protocols for the application of the model. This protocol will be approved for use until either a formal capacity assurance program is added to the consent decree, or the system-wide dynamic wet weather model is finalized. The revised interim program for review of capacity requests was submitted to EPA yesterday. There is no requirement that they approve it, but as the CEO indicated, we met with EPA and EPD about 2 weeks ago and left that meeting with a strong spirit of cooperation and collaboration. And so we have shared that program with EPA, again, even though their direct approval is not required. So the key features of this new protocol, again, all new and increased connections will be certified by a professional engineer licensed in Georgia. None will be allowed after tomorrow that have not been so certified. Under the interim protocol, we are going to use the fully developed dynamic dry weather model, and we will begin use of the steady state wet weather model. Again, real world conditions will serve as our backstop, however. So we will continue to look at historical spill data in the area where the development is proposed, as well as putting in new flow monitors or looking at historical flow monitoring data where necessary to confirm the availability of that capacity. The interim protocol to begin tomorrow also allows for alternative sewer action plans where necessary. Some of you, I'm sure, heard that before, or are aware that before the interim protocols that were put in place in August were effective, many people were being offered an alternative to put storage tanks on site to hold their flow until such time as we could be assured that our system could adequately transmit and treat that flow. So what we've done here is actually add a little more flexibility to this program. So it leaves open the possibility that developers' engineers will come to the county with potential solutions, as opposed to the county dictating what those solutions would be. We have some examples which would include either off-site or on-site improvements that would manifest on the entire system to be developer financed. We also would like to encourage developers within one sewer shed who are facing similar issues to work together to find collaborative approaches, either that they can finance or they can finance in cooperation with the county to get the capacity they need in those areas where we can't quite yet make a determination. So, again, that program that will begin tomorrow is designed to be in place until either the fully dynamic wet weather model is developed or the capacity assurance program that we've been discussing with EPA is formally added to the consent decree. When those events occur, we will move to what we're calling the long-term solution. Final procedures for evaluating capacity are being developed now to be implemented when the following events occur. In order to move to that final solution, we do need to develop a system-wide dynamic wet weather model. That's in contrast to the static wet weather model we have today. The dynamic model will be much more sensitive and will allow those more site-specific determinations to be made with more accuracy. So in order to do that, though, there are several steps. In order to develop the system-wide dynamic wet weather model, we anticipate a process that will take between 18 and 24 months. Beginning pretty much immediately, we have our consultants performing site investigations to determine the proper placement of flow meters and rain gauges to gather the data necessary for model development. Those will be deployed, and we will be gathering the necessary information to build the model over about the next 12 months or so. Once that information is gathered, the data will be analyzed, the model itself will be developed, validated, calibrated, goes through all the necessary scientific steps to prove its accuracy or to establish its accuracy. We anticipate that step will take an additional 6 months to a year, meaning the entire dynamic wet weather model development should take somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 24 months. At the end of that process, what we will have is a model and a program that is much more closely aligned with the original intent of the consent decree. The other piece that we need to put in place in order to move forward with our long-term solution, as I already mentioned, is the potential addition of a capacity assurance program to the consent decree. This is to be developed simultaneously with the dynamic wet weather model. We hope that it will be in place within a year or so. The county and our consultants are going to work cooperatively with EPA and EPD to develop a program that meets both the needs of the agency, the EPA and EPD, the county, is compliant with the consent decree, and to the extent we can, allows development to move forward while we protect the environment. So the other bonus or potential for a capacity assurance program is that it can provide some flexibility and allow for connections in lieu of certification in certain circumstances. But primarily, we are looking to that long-term solution once we have that dynamic wet weather model in place. If we have the capacity assurance program approved and added to the consent decree, which does require the permission of the court and the cooperation of the agencies, which again, we're working collaboratively with them and believe we will have EPA and EPD's cooperation. But because of the court involvement there, we can't put an exact timeline on when we expect to get that done. But we do hope to get it done within the year. And once that's in place, we may be able to move to this final solution more quickly. But we are very much looking forward to development of the dynamic wet weather model to give us the most accurate possible look at how our system reacts to those wet weather events. So that's a little bit about where the model was, where it is today, where we intend it to be starting tomorrow, and where we hope to have it within 18 to 24 months. So now I'm going to turn it over to Darren Eastall, our consent decree administrator, to talk a little bit about where we are today in this year's progress with the consent decree.
Good evening. I am Darren Eastall. I'm the consent decree administrator. It's my privilege to work with the DeKalb County consent decree team and also with our consent decree program management team. I want to tell you a little bit about our progress to date that we've had. throughout the consent decree. This for this year, we've cleaned 220 miles of sewers. That includes small diameter and large diameter. As we've publicized, our large diameter sewer mains have not been cleaned in about 50 years. So that includes the large diameters in our priority areas and our major capacity restoration contract. We've removed about 5.1 tons of debris from our system that is choking down our system, blocking our system, those kinds of things. And we've completed 1,821 stream crossing inspections. Very important, as you've seen, we have stream crossing spills that we get out and we walk the streams. We check the streams to make sure that our creek crossings, which are vulnerable to limbs and trees floating down our creeks, that we check those on a periodic basis. We've had several projects completed in 2015 and 16. They're listed here. I won't go through all of them. And then we have several projects that we're completing this month for the 2017 projects, several lift station projects that we have, some very large ones in the south, Johnson Creek, Honey Creek, large lift station projects where we're upgrading, adding pumps and capacity to our system. We've replaced a lot of manhole covers. Vented manhole covers have holes in them, and that allows rainwater to get into our system, which adds to the amount of flow in our system. So we've gone out, we've replaced about 1,400, almost 1,500 vented manhole lids throughout the county. It's been a big effort, but we feel that that's important to keep that inflow out of our system. We've been improving our transparency and communication. We've been doing things like this. We've been reaching out to the public. We've been trying to communicate as much as we can. What we're doing with the consent decree, making sure that everyone knows what we're doing. And I could say the second bullet down, the last bullet down there, is unprecedented communication between our departments in DeKalb County. Since I've taken over, when I've been in charge of the consent decree, communicating with the law department and IT and HR, purchasing, it's been just amazing. It's something that's really helped us advance our program this year. So that's one thing I definitely want to highlight. It's just great communication that we now have throughout DeKalb County. A couple years ago, we've started with, I'm sorry, not a couple years ago, but this year we've started a 2-year project with AECOM, our CIP, our Capital Improvement Program Management Team, to begin a master planning study of DeKalb County, which is very important to our economic development portion of DeKalb County. It helps us know what future flows we have. It helps us know what sewer improvements we need to make. It's very important. It's going to be a great addition. It helps us with everything that we've talked about, modeling and rehabilitation and upsizing and all of those very important programs in the consent decree, is having the master plan in place. Talking about sewer capacity requests, in August of 2017, we had 481 total applications. 314 of those have been approved, and then 167 are still waiting final review. Since August of 2017, we've had 177 additional applications, and 57 of those have been approved, and 120 are still pending final approval. Talk about sanitary sewer overflows. We've been using the words overflows and spills and all kinds of things. So real quickly, I just wanted to go over the definitions so everyone can know about those. So a building backup, well, sanitary sewer overflows, there's 3 different categories. One is the building backup. A building backup is a discharge of wastewater from our system that goes into a building and stays there. So it doesn't come out of the building, can come out of the toilet or the shower or some other connection to our system. But that's what a building backup is. An overflow is a discharge of wastewater from our system that comes out into the environment but does not reach the waters of the state. So it comes out and sits on the ground, may come out a manhole, a lift station, broken pipe, something like that, but it does not reach the waters of the state. And then the third category is a spill. A spill is just like an overflow, but it does reach the waters of the state. And the waters of the state are rivers, creeks, streams, lakes, ponds, and our storm system, catch basins, storm drains. So if an overflow happens and it comes out and reaches a river, lake, stream, then it becomes a spill. And so those are our most important. As Mr. CEO mentioned, the focus of the consent decree is to eliminate sanitary sewer overflows, but of course sanitary spills are most important. We've seen an uptick in spills this year. We had several significant rain events, including a tropical storm that came through DeKalb County and the city of Atlanta. So those have increased the amount of spills that we've had, and we've also had seen an uptick in the amount of grease-related spills that we have in DeKalb County. Those are two big categories that we've seen an increase in spills this year. Speaking of grease-related spills, we need your help. We need your help to help us prevent fog, fats, oils, and grease-related spills. We ask that you prevent, stop, don't put grease into the system. If you could wipe out any cooking utensils you have, we have funnels in the back, scrapers in the back that can help you scrape that out, put it into the trash, and then wipe out the pan or whatever you've got. Put that in the trash. If you're going to enjoy a fried turkey here at Christmas time, we ask that you don't dump the cooking oil down the toilet. Those kinds of things. We are going to be increasing the amount of fog education that we have because, like I said, the fog spills are on the rise this year. So we ask for your help. We also ask for your help to report spills immediately. If you see something, whether it's a manhole, a clean out, a pipe, a lift station, any place that you think sewer might be involved, even if you don't know, please call us. Our phone number is 770-270-6243. 770-270-6243. I have it programmed into my phone. I hope you'll program it into yours. Another way to reach us is through DeKalb Water Ops at DeKalbCountyGA.gov. That's our email. Both of those, the phone number, which is 770-270-6243, and DeKalb Water Ops at DeKalbCountyGA.gov are monitored 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That's our dispatch center. So if you could give us a call, let us know that you've seen something you would like us to respond to. We would absolutely love to come out, check on that sewer spill, check on that overflow, get it taken care of. That's all I got. Back to Mr. CEO.
Thank you, gentlemen, and this concludes the presentation. There will be a question and answer session, and in concluding, this is what I want to share, and it's a commitment. And the practices that led us to the precipice of literally disaster, environmentally and otherwise in DeKalb County, those practices will not exist in DeKalb County, in this government. That's just a fact. We are public servants paid by the taxpayers to get a job done. That's the commitment I make to you, the people who hired me for this job. We will do better. We are doing better. I can't recreate the past, but we can change the trajectory of the future. That's what we're about. That's what we're doing. Learning from the mistakes, not dwelling on the mistakes. A new day has dawned in DeKalb County. We need your insight, your input, your criticisms, your direction, but more importantly, we need your support as we get this effort back on track and live up to the letter and the spirit of this consent decree. And as I've told my colleagues, the consent decree to me is a minimum. And you didn't elect me just to aspire to achieve a minimum. We want to become a model of a county that protects its natural resources, but also encourages and supports economic growth and development. That's what we are focused on here today. So now we will try as best we can to answer your questions, specific questions regarding specific projects and proposals can better be answered in a different setting so that we can have access to the information you have, but we will answer any question that you ask, as well as we'll be receiving questions through the internet, I understand. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Well, I'll ask Mr. Breinhoff to speak more specifically, but because we delayed, because things did not happen when they should have happened, actually the money was not spent in how it was projected to be spent. So those 2 years and 3 years that nothing occurred because the DeKalb County government, we couldn't get our act together. Those were years that projects that should have been brought online and completed were not. But I'll let Mr. Breinhoff speak.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, as you recall, the entire water sewer CIP, which is approved back in 2012, was $1.345 billion. And there's really 4 numbers that I'd say you should keep in mind if you're trying to kind of track the spending progress. Out of that 1.345 billion CIP, there was about 450 million of the consent decree work. Also in that CIP is work at the Snapfinger wastewater plant, work on water lines, work on the pole bridge and Candler plants, and other things. So the CIP is not just consent decree, but there was about 450 million toward what was estimated at 700 million cost to complete the 8.5-year consent decree. So those are kind of your 2 table stakes, right? Right now, the department has spent, 2017, just over 450 to 500 million toward the $1.345 billion. And that's all kind of work, Snapfinger plant, water lines, as well as consent decree. Out of the consent decree portion, they're right at about 150 million toward that first 450 that was in the CIP toward that original 700 million estimate. So you can see, as the CEO described, because of some lost time, we now have a lot of work to do to get caught up, right? But those are probably the 4 key numbers if you're trying to say, where do we stand in a spend rate, both toward the consent decree and out of the whole overall water sewer CIP that your rates are paying for. Make sense?
I appreciate your comments, Mr. Thurmond. My question relates to where we are today as well. And the fact of the matter is DeKalb County has a capacity issue. That's why there are dry weather spills all the time. When it's raining is one thing, but when there's dry weather, there's a whole different perspective on this ongoing problem of sanitary sewer overflows. To my question, the hydraulic model that Mr. Roach mentioned is, from what I could take from it, designed to ensure that hookups continue to a system that's already overtaxed. So I want to know, for the now until June 2020, when this consent decree ends, what is the county going to do to help reduce sanitary sewer overflows? Not a hydraulic model, not people hooking up. What are you going to reduce this travesty that DeKalb County is experiencing? We will have close to 200 sanitary sewer overflows by the end of the year. That's millions and millions of gallons of sewage right off the tap. It's not diluted pretty much in any way. So that's my question. I appreciate your comments about protecting the environment, but what I'm looking for over the next couple of years is a reduction in sanitary sewer overflows, and that hasn't happened since the consent decree was signed.
I don't disagree with that. Obviously it hadn't, but I'm convinced that, as you recall, as we just presented, 60% of the SSOs are fault related. So we can do a lot about that. And that's in terms of those of us who use this system and not depositing oils and grease into the system. The great majority of our problem are fault related. Just a fact. And everyone in this room, within their voice and in their sphere of influence, can have an impact on that. I was so proud of my wife this morning. She poured the grease in a little container, which is a step in the right direction. That's not what she's always done. We've been married 20 years. She's changing her habits. So we can all change habits to make sure that that does not occur. Number one, the cleaning that is taking place will assist. There is no magic bullet that I have in my holster that I can use to change this history. If you hadn't had a system that not cleaned its trunk lines in 50 years, think about that. In 50 years. And now we're cleaning hundreds of miles, but that is an ongoing process. The easement, the inspections, we had stopped a countywide inspection program. It just stopped. The creek crossing. All of this working together, the work that's taking place with the lift stations, all of this will reduce, I think, SSOs in the future. The reality is, and I make no bones about it, is that I don't have a switch I can just turn on to change what has occurred. The reason it's an 8 to 10 year process to get the job done, because it's an 8 to 10 year process. And DeKalb County was in trouble in 2011. That's why we ended up in a consent decree. Then we lost time after that. So this is a progress that will take place going forward. I'm convinced that if we continue on the path that we're on, we will see a reduction in SSOs in the future. That's all I can really promise you.
To the issue of the fog problem. And I agree, there are some things that can happen positively with that.
Yes,
and it's one thing that is specifically identified in the consent decree, and there is not much in that consent decree that holds DeKalb responsible. There are few measurables in it, but there is supposed to be a review and a revisiting of the fog ordinance, which has been dragging along now for a couple of years, at least. So when is the fog ordinance going to make its way to the county commission?
Yeah, I think the county commissioners, that's something that's being debated. It was already on the table when I arrived in DeKalb County. It was there before I came. And so I'll let Mr. Reinhardt, who may have more history than I, to provide some background prior to January 1st, where it was and where it is now. It's been in the breast and the purview of the commissioners for some time.
Yes, as you're probably aware, having been active both in the Citizen Advisory Committee and in many of the meetings, there are three key aspects to the different draft ordinances that have been bouncing around. The one everybody's universally agreed on is more robust education, and continuing to put more effort into getting more and more of our 700,000 citizens to do their part. The second part that's largely in agreement among all the different stakeholders is that some form of cooperative cleaning and inspection and enforcement process with multifamily properties is a next logical target. Restaurants are the current universe required by state law, food service establishments. And then the third piece, the one where there's not as much universal agreement, but the commission's studying it and working to decide which way they want to go, would be unique nationwide, and that would be to require that new multifamily properties put inside some of the same kind of interceptor equipment that food service establishments have. So as you've seen from the meetings you've been in, with these kind of issues, when there's universal agreement to go fast, when there's large agreement but not universal agreement, sometimes in the democratic process it takes more time. But there is intense interest. I'm sure if you ask any of the 7 commissioners, they're very vigilant and interested in resolving it. But ultimately, the county's got to make the tough call. Is it what everybody is largely in agreement in, or is it some also of the things that everybody's not yet fully in agreement in? But ultimately, it will get resolved one way or the other.
So can we get an estimate?
Yes, ma'am.
Can we get an estimate on when it might be resolved? Because Ted knows, we heard this, Ted and I go way back. We heard this long time ago. We still hear it. It doesn't take much to work the issues. The county commission should be as interested in this as anybody. So when are we, and that's the same issue pretty much I've had with this whole conversation, when are we moving towards something positive to impact problems? I mean, we can talk, but the fog ordinance is one that we can do. It simply needs to move from wherever it is, wherever that may be, and I don't know if any commissioners are here.
Yeah, we do have one.
Oh, you're here. Well, maybe she can tell us what is the holdup with the one thing we can do.
Well, I certainly think, talking to your commissioners, letting them know about your concerns is one thing. I have not seen Mr. Reinhardt present any of the administration's ideas about FOG to our PWI committee, so I would like to see that. If we had the administration engage us on that, that would be certainly helpful, because we haven't had any robust talks about that in PWI committee, and I sit on that committee, so the administration has not brought any proposal to us for that that I know about. I am personally for some of the most stringent enforcement mechanisms, because when I first came on the commission in December 14, there was a move to try and get some voluntary compliance with some of the multifamilies, and that didn't work. I mean, it just absolutely didn't work. So I don't think that the voluntary compliance will be, I think it's proven itself to be a non-starter. So I think we need some tough legislation there to get that under control. And of course, we have to clean the sewers, and we have to upsize where we need to upsize, and that hasn't been done as quickly as it needs to be. So I am cautiously optimistic about the administration's new dedication to fixing the problem and spending the money on these upgrades, but we do need a robust fog ordinance with teeth. That's my personal belief, and I think you should continue to make that a priority as citizens. Talk to your commissioners, email your commissioners, and show up for public comment, and let everyone hear your voice.
Mike, is the county facing any penalties from the EPD for the 2 to 3 years of inaction? I know you paid a bunch of money recently for spills, but for having not done anything for a large portion of the 8.5 years.
Well, I can't speak specifically as to what they may or may not do. I can tell you what I've said on that particular issue. Obviously, we do not want to pay fines, but I'm not so much concerned about the fines as in getting it right going forward. And that's what I speak to. The facts are the facts. And if we fail, then we admit to those failures. I'm focused on getting it right going forward so that we don't find ourselves in this position again. As I said earlier, I can't change the past, but I can help focus and direct the future. And I'm convinced that in the future, we won't be having conversations about fines. And what I committed to EPA and EPD and to my staff and everyone else is that we will get this job done, and that we will do it in an expeditious way, and we'll do it in a way that the citizens of this county will be proud. And that's my commitment. One of the things that surprised me most over the past year working with the consent decree, when Darren and other longtime employees, one day in a bit of candor, admitted to me that they had never been in a meeting with a CEO. That's not a criticism, that's just a fact. I'm not is that fair? Now, I've been in too many sewer meetings, to be honest with you. I've learned more than I ever hoped to learn. But the fact is, it's just that important. And I've learned a lot, and I continue to learn. But the most important thing is we got great professionals who have the knowledge, the skill, the expertise, the education, and the training. What they need is commitment from the top, to know that we will support them and our consultants and contractors to get this job done. And that's all I can offer. I don't bring expertise in it. I'm not an engineer. But I can say that when things are demonstrated in terms of resources, personnel, support, when it's needed, it's delivered. And that's my commitment. And I think, and a commitment that our departments are going to work together to get the job done. Whether it's purchasing and contracts and law and communication and watershed, you know, we won't have any departments that exist unto themselves as a kingdom or fiefdom. We're all here working for the taxpayer. And if we work here because we volunteer to come, none of us have to do these jobs. We volunteer for these jobs, then we're going to live up to the expectations associated with the job. Because any of us, any day we want to, can go and work somewhere else. So if we show up in DeKalb County on a work day, then that's a commitment to do what's in the best interest of DeKalb County.
Yes, I want to thank you for the presentation and the information that has been shared. Could you say, in terms of the 220 miles that have actually been cleaned, what percentage does that represent, and what is the projected timeline for completing and cleaning the whole system?
Mayor Jackson, I'm going to call on Darren to answer.
That's about 10%. We have about 2,600 miles in the county. So that's just this year that we've done about 220 miles. Still numbers coming in here in December, but of course last year, the year before that, we cleaned as well. So I think last year we were around 3 million feet. I don't know exactly how many miles that is off the top of my head, but a little more than 1 million the year before that. So just year after year. But the key thing about that 220 is that this is all diameters now. Those years before were kind of the smaller diameters, the 15 inches below. But yeah. So about 10% this year. What was that, about 20% last year, I guess? So, yeah. Right, so they started in April, May time frame, the large diameters.
I have a question. Who, starting tomorrow, who will be the Georgia PE that will be certified capacity, since I guess tomorrow's the 20th, right? Am I right on my dates? Who will be doing that?
Internal DWM staff, they were involved in a review of the protocol before it was implemented and recommended to the CEO. It's not formally been implemented yet, but it has been recommended to the CEO for implementation. It was developed by our or in coordination. We told you to go to the clubs. The protocol and program that we put in place tomorrow were developed in collaboration with our consultants at CH2, as well as a second set of consultants at DWM from Arcadis.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, so I did ask at PWI meeting if the consultants would be the professional engineer signing up, and I was told no, that it would be a county staff member who holds a Georgia PE, so is that also correct?
Correct.
Okay, but do we know who that person is going to be, or who those?
Well, we have more than one modeler commissioner, so it would depend on who they were assigned to. The way that the protocol is designed, the engineer will review for engineering purposes.
Okay.
They will make a recommendation to Mr. Eastall as the consent decree administrator. He will look at both that engineering judgment. He will not be second guessing the engineering judgment, but he will look at that along with the needs of the county to ensure that that is a proper and appropriate connection for approval. He will then send his recommendation to the CEO's designee, who is currently our COO, Zach Williams. And Mr. Williams will make the final determination as to authorize based on both the engineering judgment and the other policy considerations of the county. To be clear, policy will never override
That was my
engineering.
question, okay.
If the engineers say no, that's it, unless they qualify for a sewer action plan or some other
Sure, right,
potential way. But the certification is a required piece starting tomorrow.
Right.
That certification, again, will be forwarded to Mr. Eastall. Mr. Eastall will look at other county concerns to make sure that is an appropriate connection, make the recommendation then to the COO, who will make the final call.
And no one can overturn if a PE says there's not capacity, then that cannot be overturned by anyone, because Mr. Eastall's not a PE, Mr. Reinhardt's not a PE, so it stops there if a PE says no. Is that correct?
So I suppose there could be a difference of opinions between engineers. I mean, I'm no
But if a
engineer.
PE is willing to stamp it, then fine, but if not,
Then it could be allowed to move forward to
Right.
Mr.
Okay.
Eastall for the next level of review. But I would just say this, Commissioner, and again, I'm no
Sure.
engineer, I'm just a lawyer, but I know in my office, two people can read the same statute, and you might have slightly different ideas about what it means.
as long as they're an engineer, though, that final, okay,
Again,
so
so I
that's.
think the same thing can be said with engineers. They may look at the same facts, and they may come up with slightly different conclusions based on those facts. But if a Georgia certified professional engineer will sign off that this is an appropriate connection, it will then be forwarded to
Okay.
Mr. Eastall for his consideration.
And my last question about that, do we know how many Georgia registered PEs we have in Watershed? I mean, just how many that could possibly do
I
that?
certainly don't, but we have a team of modelers, and there are PEs available through consultants, again. I
But
think
they wouldn't sign
primarily
off.
It would be certified internally.
We don't know how many internal PEs we have?
I can't answer that question, Commissioner. No.
Mr. Wright? No, we don't know. Okay, all right, that's interesting, thank you.